Thank y'all for taking the time during lunch. So.
I'm thinking, Michael, why don't we go on and start?
Okay, that'll be fun.
Which means we'll turn it over to you. Thank y'all all for participating on short notice. And Dr. Bitzer's already done a agenda for us. You want to put that on the screen?
Yeah,
or can you
do that so that folks can see it. Hopefully you can see this agenda. From the December meeting, we had talked about 4 distinct areas, what questions folks have about counting ballots. If you were able to do any of the reading about the election law sections, what kind of experts folks would like to hear from, particularly on this topic of once a ballot is submitted, what happens after that point? And then how would folks want to get public opinion, public input, if any, on this particular issue? What I'd like to do is just kind of maybe go through particularly the questions and the experts bullet points there, see what folks have, if any, kind of questions, and I'll just kind of throw this open to the group and can take some notes here on this particular topic.
Anybody have any idea for experts that could,
or for experts, yeah,
potentially speak with us, to our committee?
So I think, just to remind you, I am a local elections director in Brunswick County. So I think if you want somebody to talk about how the votes are counted and tabulated, maybe someone from the State Board of Elections, because they could talk more generally, no matter what voting system different counties use. But then on the flip side of that, they're going to be like true experts, and they might talk really detailed, and it might not be as high level as, we're wanting to share this with the general public, not necessarily teach someone how to walk in and count the votes. So there might be like a fine line there.
Sarah and Michael, just a question on, or at least in conversation, things that I've heard people ask is in validating, making sure that as votes are counted, that there's not duplication in comparing them to the rolls. How is it managed that those calculations are verified against voter rolls and all of those accusations against duplication or people that are still on there that are deceased, those kinds of things for verifying the count?
Sure. Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna ask Michael. I guess you would be the expert on this, but I guess I want to better understand for those people in our state and country who are questioning, who are saying voter fraud. What are the things that I just want to understand? What are the things that they feel mistakes are being? How are mistakes being made? True in truth, how do they feel that mistakes are being made? Does that make sense?
That's a great question, and I think that is one of the things that hopefully this group and the larger commission is trying to address. I think certainly there are, in general, myths, concerns, perceptions about almost anything and everything when it comes to counting ballots.
Yeah.
That when your ballot is submitted, is it accurately tabulated? Are your votes truly representative in the final count? I think that there are concerns about who is submitting ballots, and is there, for lack of a better term, checks and balances that are done to ensure that one person is not submitting multiple ballots say in multiple jurisdictions.
Yep.
Particularly here in North Carolina, if you request, for example, a mail-in ballot, but then you decide, you know what, I do have time, I'm going to go cast an early in-person ballot. Well, what happens to that mail-in ballot?
Yep.
I think with mail-in ballots, and this is another group that's being tasked with, but one of the questions raised there was, can we ensure the reliability of when a voter submits their mail-in ballot to the post office, that it actually gets to the County Board of Elections? Now, there may be some things that are just completely out of our control. That we will have to acknowledge and admit that we, as an election administrating process, may be relying on outside forces to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve. But I think you raise some critical questions that I think is going to be probably the important gist of what we are trying to accomplish, and that is to have accurate information about the safety, the security, the fairness of this election administration process. And some of those questions, maybe I need to do a Google search to really kind of get a list of, here are all the myths, the concerns, this is what people are talking about, but they don't really understand or are seeking to provide disinformation about this particular process.
If I can just add two things, Michael, I've heard, particularly since North Carolina has such a big college age group, that most of them don't live here, they live out of state. What is the mechanism to prevent someone who lives in New York from voting here? And what are the checks and balances about that? That's one question. And then number two, we hear a lot about ballot harvesting.
Yeah.
And I think that scares a lot of people. Well, anyway, I won't go into something that happened a few years back, but I think that's a question we probably need to look at also.
Okay. Yes, I believe that those two issues, are oftentimes the ones that tend to bubble up the most.
Yep.
In this kind of an environment. So maybe if folks could think about, what kind of communications, what kind of, sidewalk chatter conversations you have with colleagues, friends, how their perceptions are of the counting ballots process, maybe that might help us start to build a foundation of, these are things that we need to address, that we can provide the information and some clarity to the voters of North Carolina.
Michael, are you the one typing in the agenda?
I am. Yeah, I can do that while I'm trying to talk as well.
Well, I can't do both at the same time, so I completely understand. But I do have a question to Judge Wagner. The college question, and maybe Sarah would know this, what is the requirement to be a student in the state, to vote in the state, and how do we verify that they've relinquished their ability to vote at home if they are then voting here? I've never really fully understood the requirement process for that.
I'm not sure anybody does.
Yeah. So.
So that's a great question. So I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, I don't know the answers. I'm betting Michael does, but so if I'm a college student and I go to school in Connecticut, can I register? Would it allow me to register to vote in Connecticut if I'm also registered to vote in North Carolina? Would that be allowed?
So
Yeah, and how do you check it? How does Connecticut know what's going on in North Carolina and vice versa? I think
That's the question.
They don't.
Sarah would probably be the better expert, but
Yeah.
that there was a consortium of states that got together and agreed to share their voter registration
Mhm.
and attempt to ensure that when a resident moved from one state to another and did not notify the former state of their move, that there could be some way to at least double check, merge, find duplicates that could then be resolved by the states. My understanding is that North Carolina, by state law, is not now allowed to participate in that consortium. It was actually my understanding, my recollection is that it actually started with Republican secretaries of states going to other secretaries of states who are primarily the election administrators in those states. Democrats joined in, and there was a growing movement to do that. It then got twisted into the partisan polarization dynamic, and states have started to withdraw from it. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment, Sarah? Okay.
I think that would be exactly how I see it. Yeah. So in summary, there is no state to state checking. I don't know what the rules would be in Connecticut for someone registering there, but here, say I live here in Brunswick County with my parents, I graduate high school, I go to Raleigh and go to college. I can decide as a college student where my intended home is going to be. If I move out of my parents' house and go to college and I know good and well I'm never going back to mom and dad's home, like I will stay in school and live on campus, and maybe then I'll go off and start my life. I would likely register at school and start to build my life there. If I go off to school and I know that I don't know what I'm going to do, I probably will go back home after school, or there's a chance a student can really choose. It's a lot about intent. Where does the student intend to, make their home and make their life?
And
Sarah,
I think the question at that,
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry, Judge Wagner, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, you go
I
ahead.
think that the question at that point, then they have to, I don't know what the word is, deregister or
Yeah.
unregister from their home initial registration and transfer to their new address. And I think that's what gets lost.
That is the challenge. So within North Carolina, all of the counties use the same registration database. It's owned by the state essentially. So we catch those duplicates if the student or anybody really doesn't take it upon themselves. But out of state, that's when it's a challenge. The burden really is on somebody that moves to let their previous location know, I'm no longer here. You can take me off of your rolls. And people just don't think to do that.
And this is where some of the overlap, particularly with the registration committee, is probably going to ask us to kind of work and see where these kinds of questions should reside in. But I do know, and Sarah can correct me if I say anything incorrect, that each voter gets a unique identification in this huge 7.4 million registered voter database. And when you move, that ID moves with you to the new county.
Yeah.
So that is the capability.
It is supposed to. I will tell you, it's not always perfect.
Yeah.
And a lot of those that have doubts in our process are starting to call that out. So we may not want to talk about that unique number because it really is not perfect, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Sarah, you're saying that unique number definitely does not cross state lines. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. No, that's a North Carolina thing. Yes. Yeah, there's really not much communication between states unless we have reason to believe that someone has, voted here and voted there. Then we can, the state has investigations and they can look into it, but we don't just know those things. Yeah.
Well, and it seems to me, maybe back to the consortium question, that at some point in my memory, there was conversation, or maybe it's strictly a North Carolina thing, that the database was being rewritten or revisited to catch those things, but it would seem to me it would be in everyone's best interest, regardless of political
Yep.
party, to know that we're tracking and doing as well as we can to keep up with that transference of location, and just making sure that each person gets their one vote. I know
I
that
agree.
that's a huge task. Obviously, I'm not, and when you go back to it not being perfect and all that,
Yeah.
goodness gracious, that's a arduous task, I know,
Mhm.
but I think that's what people don't quite understand.
Yeah. Well, and
Yep.
it's probably important too that just because someone's registered in two places, that in and of itself is not really the problem. It's if they utilize both of those and participate in the same election.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, like if someone moves and they've got a registration back in another state, they aren't even thinking about that registration. They're probably not trying to get a ballot sent to them using that registration so they can vote twice. So there's registration, but then there's actually using that registration to cast a ballot, and that's when it's a problem.
So Sarah, help me. I've only worked the polls a couple of times, and just kind of volunteered there anyway. But in 2016, we called New York. A guy had
Mhm.
moved. I mean, is that we did, he had moved to Burke County from New York to take care of his mother.
Mhm.
And so we did do that. Is that unusual?
Yeah, no, not really. If we know about it, and even our North Carolina registration form has a place for someone that moves here to say, where did you come from? What was your previous address? And we do notify those previous localities that so-and-so is now registered here. You can take them off of your rolls, but
Okay.
that too is the burden on the voter to let us know.
Okay.
Michael, I think Omar said he had a question he wanted to write down since his throat hurts.
Yes, yes, and I put that into the document here. He wrote, "How can we verify the quality of the voting counting machines and technology?" I think certainly for this group, this is going to be a major component of what we're going to be focused on, and probably the expert from the State Board of Elections is probably the person, somebody from that entity we will want to get involved with this group to give us the basic understanding and the background as to how voting machines are certified within the various counties, what kind of rigor does the state board require of these machines. And so certainly, Omar, I think that is a crucial question. And if there are particularly if you hear about myths or questions from the public about this particular aspect, we do know that in the past, in 2020, there was a lot of questions about this, and I think that this is, so much of this is or has been not intentionally but hidden from the public.
Yep.
That oftentimes voters just walk in, cast their ballots, and not think a thing of it. And in recent elections, with the growth of questions raised, these are the things that we're trying to, address, to, get proper and correct information out there. And so I think that this is a prime example of what this group, along with the larger commission, can be working towards.
And I have a question, just because I was reading too much about the Iowa caucuses, and I believe I read that the vote counting in the caucuses is public. You can sit and watch the votes being counted. If somebody wants to see our votes being counted in North Carolina, can they do that? They can?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, not every county will have the same level of access because we still have to maintain security
Yeah.
we can't just let everybody into our office, but no, that's a public process. It's done under the supervision of the board and during open meetings where the public is invited to attend and see what's going on.
But on election night, I could go to our election board place and
Well, again, that's kind of different depending on the county. Like I know Wake County, I think had some situation where somebody could not get access to that part of their office. But here we do, well, we also live stream here election night, so somebody could watch us do that process. But it should be as open as is possible to maintain security. It's definitely not a secret.
Yeah.
And it is done in, under the supervision of the board, which is bipartisan. And I think that's an important aspect. Is that
This
it's not
is
just one
Julie.
staff member back in a corner,
Julie,
Oh, can you hear me?
yes.
I have a question about that because I know like right now in Mecklenburg County, they are desperately looking for Democrats to be, I guess, what do you call them? Observers to watch vote counting, but you have to be, registered Democrat to do it. And I thought that they said you can't be in there unless you are one of the official watchers. Because I asked I asked specifically the woman who was trying to recruit people, and she said you can't unless you are a registered Democrat and Republican, and they only allow a certain number.
So that would be being an observer while voting is happening. But once the polls close in a polling location, that is a public process.
Yeah, no, this is
and
definitely for the evenings. This is after.
Yeah, for the,
polls
so
have
7:30, the polls close. If I'm at the polling place outside, I could go inside and watch the poll workers close that equipment.
closed. Huh.
But that's just closing the equipment. That's not really the counting. The counting happens back at the Board of Elections office.
This is at the BOE. This is what she's saying at the BOE.
Okay.
And
that
can't-
might be a space consideration. I don't know if that's coming from the Board of Elections or not. And
Okay.
again, this is why every county Board of Elections might have a different process just based on their, the setup of their office. Like I think there's one county that has glass panels, so people can watch, but they cannot interfere or, break the security. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I know it's been very tense in there because they had 3 and 3 and and it's been sort of tense because anyway. Okay, I'll have to ask more about that.
It seems to be a lot of our questions are again raising the concern that sometimes if you're not allowed to watch what's going on, you feel like somebody's hiding something from you, as well as, how do you verify, as Amar said, the accuracy of the voting machines? Yeah. I don't know how we get somebody to speak to that except somebody from the Board of Elections, but I don't know, is there some way we could canvass all of the local Board of Elections and see what their see what their policies are, Michael, as far as letting the public observe
That's a good question.
voting?
So I could probably help with getting that information just because I am a county director.
That would be good.
I would be transparent in asking, but in having dialogue with this committee I'm a part of, we were talking about I am pretty open election night. If people want to be part of the process and see the process, I may not be able to take them into the room, but I've got a live stream and I've got board members back there with them and you can watch it in this other room, but what are your kind of parameters? And I could probably get clarification just from the law or the state, is it required to be open? I always work under the assumption that anytime we're having a meeting and I consider that a board meeting, it's open to the public, but
I think that
probably getting clarification.
That would be a big help, I think, then we'd sort of know if it's a small problem or a giant problem.
I
And
think
Michael, I
I
think
can-
there's an overlap just from our other committee to this committee. I know we didn't quite get to it, but it was on our agenda, are the numbered memos and how things are handled for signature for the mail-in ballots. I definitely believe there's an overlap in that question because it's part of the counting process of the board going through and opening the ballots, validating them before they're sent to the machines to be counted. But with the numbered memos, they were no longer verifying signature and requiring two signatures and things like that. So I do think the numbered memos come up in this committee as well.
I was thinking that same thing. Yeah.
Because I sat in a gazillion meetings and watched him count paper after paper after paper and watch the board open them and all of that. And, you know, the transference of the process then to the worker and then to the machine and all of that kind of thing. But again, the numbered memos significantly changed the process.
Yeah. I think certainly that with the overlap with the mail-in ballots, I really like Sarah's idea. And if we could, I'm thinking like a social scientist, so bear with me here, but I'm almost thinking like a grid process, a list of all the 100 counties, and then perhaps across in the columns would be, you know, is there live streaming available? Is there adequate room for outside observers to come in and watch the process? You know, what are all the characteristics of what the counties do with their counting process, and then just make basically an X grid. I mean, these counties do these things, these counties do these things. And that way, I think we as a committee would get a better grasp on this particular question and see the diversity or see the unity, the sameness that the counties are operating on.
Yeah.
That would be another good validation for public information to say, you know, 90 counties live stream, or, you know, whatever the criteria might be, to give us a sense of those kinds of things.
And then it would give us an idea of what recommendations, if any, we might want to make. 'Cause there
Correct.
might be some counties that never even thought about doing live streaming, and that type of thing. That'd
Well,
be
and it
good if
may also
Sarah has
give-
the time. Haha.
Just people on this committee that have not had an integral part of it. If you know that your county that you live in would allow you to come in election night and watch what they do, I think that would probably help you learn how the process goes, so that when we turn around and try to put some final product out, you know, you might go into it thinking it works one way and then find, oh, it really is completely different than that. And if the public knew that this is really how it works.
Good idea.
Sarah, that's funny that you say that, because that's exactly why I started going, because I don't like to talk about things that I've not seen or don't necessarily know for myself. So I started getting more and more involved, and it's helpful. It's really helpful.
Should we, as a committee, think about when I'm thinking ahead here, but we'll have the next couple of months to kind of solidify and see what folks are wanting to present ultimately in June, when we have to make our presentation of a draft report to the full commission. Would it be helpful to almost have a section devoted to, here's the step-by-step process once a ballot is inserted into the machine, or once a mail-in ballot is received at the county, what is that step-by-step process?
Yep.
By which those ballots are contained, secured, processed, and then ultimately put into the system by which the results are known. Should we have a dedicated section to basically just lead anybody through that process?
Yes. And
I
thought-
think so, a simplified version, because this stuff can get really in the weeds, but like something that would apply to any county that you were to select in North Carolina. I think there could definitely be, these are the steps that are taken, and I think that would be helpful if we could point to it.
And going back to what Glenda said, we've got the March primaries coming up. I'm sure the Board of Elections would love to have some of us there, but that might be a good opportunity to see if we could go observe the votes being counted or live stream or whatever.
No, I think that's a good idea. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Because people want, you know, I think what Sarah, some of the things you said are kind of, you know, they catch your attention because people want consistency.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to know that, please don't tell me you crossed the county lines and it's being done differently there.
Mhm.
Yep, yep.
So, you know, people want to know it's consistent and they want to know it's professional and yeah, Michael, I think it's a great idea to kind of give a very simplified version of what happens to that vote. And I do think the primaries are because the primaries they're pretty early this year.
Yep.
March 5th, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good time for us to see if we can get in and watch and see what happens. I think that's great.
I don't want to add to her desk, her calendar, Sarah, but if I
Yeah.
took a preliminary stab at something based on what I can glean, State Board of Elections, what I
Yeah.
kind of know in the back of my head, if I shoot you that and you make any revision changes necessary,
Definitely.
maybe we can start that as the process for building off of our
Definitely. Yeah.
all right.
Definitely. And I think really, so we're concentrating on counting votes. And I know we've talked about like, you know, registration and that all does count. But when we're thinking about counting votes and making sure the machines are working right, I mean, all of that is starting now where counties are testing their equipment. So like there's so much more to counting votes than just the election night piece.
Yeah.
You know, we're testing equipment, we're sealing it. Yeah. So having all of that, you know, and that is stuff that all counties do. So.
We might not have the capacity for this, but so this is just dreaming. But wouldn't it be great to have like, you know, one of these very user-friendly graphics that showed how that worked? All these cute little images that kind of showed that. I don't know if we have that capacity. I don't know if we have those skills, but that would sure make it easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
And in that vein, I think, you know, again, the website that we have, and I'll put the link back in there in the chat for folks if you don't recall. I think that that's the perfect place for this information to reside. And we have noted with other committees, they are wanting user-friendly, basic graphics that help lead the viewer through the process. And I think we as a steering committee are probably going to have to look at, you know, can we hire a graphics consultant or somebody who can design this work of under counting votes. This is the process. And here's a very user-friendly type of point and click and see how things proceed on. Is it short videos that maybe get posted that, you know, 3 to 5 minutes that tell the stages and the steps of this particular process? So we're finding within the committees that are meeting kind of commonality of various, for lack of a better term, display mechanisms and methods to be able to promote this information. And that, you know, hopefully, even when this commission is finished, the plan is to talk about having the website continue to live at Catawba, and we could update over time and have as kind of a central repository of information about things like this.
Michael, someone on the other committee that I'm on, just doing a YouTube video perhaps, with different short segments. That's just something else we could think about.
Okay. All right.
So I think we have experts we would like to have from the Board of Elections, State Board of Elections, to speak to us perhaps, and then I'm just curious, Sarah, has Michael Crowell, who used to be at the School of Government, ever spoken to y'all?
Yes, I have heard him at a conference or two
Was he
before.
helpful? I just thought of him, but he gets a little
He
dry
is,
sometimes.
Bob Joyce is pretty helpful, but when we talk about getting into the weeds, they may not know the current ins and outs of the counting of votes and the, you know, like the testing and the certifications and all. Like, I don't even understand all of that, and I'm an elections director. I mean, I opened the state's voting equipment website, and there are probably 30 PDF documents of each
Yeah.
equipment and all of the things and the specs about it. You know, it
Yeah.
can get really in the weeds. Yeah.
I was just trying to think, have there been any lawsuits brought
Mhm.
recently,
Mhm.
concerning counting votes?
Mm.
I'm just trying to think if maybe,
Oh, yeah.
looking at Bob Hunter, who was, used to be on the Supreme Court, and
Mhm.
who else spoke? Anyway, some of those lawyers that might have been involved in some of those cases could possibly be interesting and helpful.
Mhm.
All right. One thing that we do have on the website is now, and one of the questions asked in December was about public input.
Mhm.
I want to raise we're at 12:38. I want to respect people's time so we can conclude by 1. Two things about that. One, on the website, and Rachel, maybe you could give some information about this. There is a public input opportunity for folks to start submitting questions about relevant issues in areas. And then the other thing that we had talked about amongst the steering committee is I've been in touch with a number of particularly higher education institutions that have polling operations. So Elon, Meredith, ECU, High Point, their polling directors have indicated a willingness to maybe put 2 or 3 or 4 questions about particular topics to have run on a poll that they'll be fielding at some point in the spring. If there are particular questions that you think would be good to gauge public opinion about this particular process, I would ask for maybe in the next week for you to send myself and to Judge Wagner those questions so that we can kind of consolidate them and then work with the respective polling organizations to see who would be interested and if there's availability on their surveys to get information out there to get a sense of public opinion on particular issues. And Rachel just put into the chat the contact link for the website, so you can take a look at that at your time.
I would love for the website to be publicized more, but I don't know how to do that. So,
Okay, so put that on there. Put that in there. All right. Any thoughts on getting polling on respective areas and general topics?
and Mike is Michael Crowell, Crowell, not Crowley.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anything else folks want to bring to our attention? We've covered a lot, but this is going to be a lot to address.
I think we sort of got our little roadmap at least.
Oh, do want to the steering
The
committee.
next couple of months, maybe.
Yeah, the steering committee did ask for a calendar of meetings from now until May, just to kind of see how folks are proceeding along. If we want to do at least one a month between now, for February, March, and April, into there.
I wonder if we could set something like the second Wednesday or second Friday, or it might be easier to remember.
That would be helpful.
Okay. Are Wednesdays or Fridays better for folks?
I will say that in the last meeting, it seemed like we established that Wednesdays worked the best for everyone. And if this time works great, I can just have a recurring meeting set up from now until June, and we can just plan to meet on this. I think this would be like the second or third Wednesday. This would be the third Wednesday. So if you want to do that, we can just kind of set that recurring meeting.
Rachel, I mean, I've got a conflict on I've got a quarterly regular meeting on the third and fourth Wednesdays. The third Wednesday that's from 12 to 2.
Do we
So I
want to do plan for the second Wednesday?
For me.
That works for me. The second works better.
I think that works for me also.
I think that's fine with me.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent. All right.
And you'll set those up as recurring, Rachel?
Yeah, they'll be set up as a recurring meeting. The Zoom
Okay.
link will be good for every single meeting. You can add it to your calendar and it will fill out for all the meetings. But we'll continue to send reminder emails with it. So if you lose the link, that's completely fine.
Second
Thank you.
Wednesday in February. What date is that? Does anybody know off the top of their
That
Valentine's.
Valentine's? Hey,
There you
okay.
go.
Valentine's, yes, 14th.
I'm supposed to be in trial that whole week, Michael, so y'all can go on without me. Maybe the case will settle, who knows, but right now I'm set for the whole week.
Okay, I just looked at my calendar. I may be in a presentation that I've got locked in already on that date, but let me work with that.
Do we want to try to plan for maybe for the February meeting, we can do like the first Wednesday in February, and then moving forward, we can have it be the second Wednesday?
First Wednesday, I'm not here, but that's fine.
I'm not here on the first Wednesday either.
Well, go ahead and plan on the 14th, and if I can work my way around it, I'll do my best to try and do that.
Okay, will do.
And if not, somebody else gets to be in charge.
All right. Anything else that folks want to bring to the group?
Well, as far as any experts, we want to maybe wait until after the next meeting to see where we are, as to who we might want to invite, or how do we do that?
That's fine. What I can do is take what we've done here and maybe start thinking in terms of what we would ultimately provide to the full commission, and just start scoping some things out, some various areas. And then
Okay.
that way we can identify, yeah, let's hear about certification of equipment. Let's hear from somebody about topic X, topic Y. And I think that maybe getting the skeleton of an organizational approach to the final report might be helpful to start focusing in on things.
And does Sarah think she'll have time to talk to some of the other Board of Elections people about their?
Time. Oh, I've got all the time in the world. There's
I'm
nothing
sure you
going
do,
on.
yes.
I know I keep volunteering for stuff. I'm like, what am I doing to myself? No, really what I plan to do, I'm probably going to call Pat Gannon. He's the communications director or public information office at the state, and just see if he already has any of this information, because why reinvent the wheel? But honestly, I may not even sort out what I get, but just put together like a Microsoft survey where counties can just like, toggle an answer for me and provide any additional details. And, if some don't respond, I can try to follow up. I may not have time. We'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure any of us would be glad to help, but I'm not sure
Thank
they'd
you.
listen to
Yeah.
me if I call them.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
So,
Good.
Thank you. I think it's been very helpful today.
mhm.
I think it has been too.
Me too. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you're getting ready to do.
Greatly
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
We will see folks in February.
Okay.
Have a
Sounds
good
great.
day, Michael.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Take
Everybody,
care.
take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.